In my lunar eclipse video, I spoke about sudden exposures, hidden material rising, and long buried stories finding daylight. I mentioned Bill Clinton at the time. I had already checked his chart in September and noted a window of vulnerability, but I did not explore it fully. The current climate makes this a suitable moment to look deeper. Welcome back to my channel, Astrobabushka. It's Irina K, and I'm a Vedic astrologer, and I apply ancient, more than 3,000 years old knowledge to modern time, mixing it with modern outer planets, asteroids, and astrocartography. Now, lunar eclipse back in September with star Akirnar, the star often linked with the sword of Archangel Michael, fell on the 6th house of Bill Clinton's chart. So there are no natal planets there, and the eclipse point stood far from the cusp, yet it still touched the part of his chart that deals with disputes, illness, court matters, and matters that pull a person into uncomfortable visibility. During that eclipse, the sun had just passed over his own sun in the 12th house in Leo. His natal sun stands at 2 degrees of Leo, and the transit sun during the eclipse was at 21 degrees, pretty far. But still, this movement across the hidden sector of his chart sets a tone of exposure working from the inside out. The solar eclipse in 21st, I believe, September, was in the 21 degree in Virgo, tied with the star Bennett Nash. And it's much closer to his planets. It only 8 degrees from his ascendant away. And solar eclipses in general are far more consequential for public figures, for politicians, and this one stood out back in September as a clear signal. The sun rules his 12th house, and its eclipse in the 1st house points to themes of withdrawal, secrets, and private actions meeting the public eye. In this video, I invite you to look at his chart with me and consider what these recent alignments may indicate for the months ahead and how his fate may unfold in the near future. So when I began reviewing his chart, I worked through several timing systems: Vimshottari, Shodashottari because it's applicable, Yogini, and Chara dashas. So what stood out at once for me was that every system activates his debilitated Venus. This repetition is never accidental, and it shows a single karmic thread being pulled from several directions at the same time. So in the D60, the deepest karmic chart, it's the deepest residue from previous lifetimes, Venus is again debilitated. So this usually means the soul has returned with unfinished lessons tied to Venusian themes. It does not pass quietly. It pushes a person toward experiences that will expose personal weaknesses or patterns they have carried for a long time. Now, D30 chart of struggle and vulnerability, also relationship chart. Venus rules the 8th house there. And when its period becomes active, it brings temptation and crisis. And this placement can disturb a person's stability and invite situations that grow beyond their control. Also, it is said by Mr. Goel, a Vedic astrologer, that ruler of the 8th house in D30 brings difficulties and troubles to the house where this planet occupies in Rasi chart, and Venus in debilitated position in Bill Clinton's chart in the 1st house. So it his body, physical body, it his reputation as well, it is his public figure, it his face, it's how other people see him. So in the D16, the chart of inner happiness and comfort, Venus is also debilitated in the 4th house and sits too close to Sun. Also, Rahu afflicts that area. So that combination can unsettle emotional balance and produce choices that disturb one's sense of inner safety and stability. In the main birth chart, Venus again sits with Mars in the first house and receives Saturn's gaze from 11th. So this creates a pattern that becomes very hard to escape. It produces actions driven by impulse, followed by consequences that return over time with weight and persistence. This is the kind of karma that can be called hard karma, the unavoidable one that grows louder each time it cycles back. And it can shape a person's public fate when its period become active again. Now, during the major Venus period in the Yogini Dasha system back in time, Paula Jones brought forward her claim of sexual harassment. Later, when Venus became active in his Vimshottari Dasha period, he entered the relationship with Monica Lewinsky, and that story eventually became a huge scandal. So each time Venus rose in his timing, the same pattern surfaced: personal choices turning into public exposure. Now, we reach a point where every timing system activates the same debilitated Venus. It does not matter which lens you use, the chart keeps returning to one planet and one weakened placement. When several dasha systems converge like this, the chart speaks with unusual clarity. It is a signal that same unresolved theme is rising again and is rising with force. A little bit about his Venus. So it stands in Virgo in first house in Hasta, close to the star, a fixed star Algorab. Now, this part of the sky often carries this sharp, restless energy. It pulls a person toward choices that mix desire and secrecy and can lead to actions made in haste or under pressure. Mars, together with Venus, they're even more escalating this topic. Venus is debilitated here, which weakens judgment in personal matters and invites situations that become difficult to manage once they unfold. Mars is ruler of worst 8th house and 3rd house, and this ties again planet of impulse and risk and aggression and action to the house of crisis and the house of self-expression. So when Mars touches the weakened Venus, the mind can move quickly while the sense of limits becomes blurred. It creates a tendency to cross boundaries and later confront the consequences. Now, there's also another, as I mentioned, malefic aspecting Venus, so it becomes even more afflicted, and it is Saturn. And it's a ruler of the 5th and 6th houses. So 5th brings past tendencies, past karma, and old habits. And the 6th brings conflict, litigation, public criticism, also anything that related to the courts. So Saturn's influence tightens the knot around Venus and brings an element of pressure, repetition, and repayment. Now, Hasta is ruled by Moon, and his Moon sits in the 8th house, again under Saturn's aspect. So the mind is easily pulled into hidden or complicated territory, and emotional reactions run deep. Jupiter does aspect the Moon, and they create some sort of Gajakeshri yoga that obviously help him rise in his life. And it offers some guidance, of course, but Jupiter is weak. It's in a 0 degree in Sandhi between the signs. So its support is weak, and it's a faint support, like a lantern with a little oil left. So this combination shows a pattern that follows him through life. It's very karmic. Venus does not act alone. It carries the weight of Mars, Saturn, Moon, and even weak Jupiter. And when its period's active, the same theme reappears. Private choices rising into public view and reshaping his fate. So I checked his solar return, Varshabhala chart, and Sun there it's a ruler of the chart, and it's together with Ketu in the 10th house. And the public image becomes the main topic of this whole year. So basically, life putting him on the performance stage. At his age, this light of the cameras and attention, I guess, will be hard. I think it speaks volumes about his public image possibility being exposed and or redirected by forces outside of his control. Now, Ketu is in Magha, in its own domain, so it's not necessarily harmful, but Ketu is still a deliverer of karma. It may knock on his door to collect a debt. So by the end of November, the Sun's period in the Varshabhala cycle ends and the Moon period begins. So remember, Moon we have in 8th house afflicted, under the Saturn's gaze, again afflicted. And here Moon is also occupies 8th house, place tied with crisis, intense scrutiny, and unraveling of hidden matters. A little bit even deeper, it rules two difficult sahams, Satru and Bandhana, which relate to enmity, pressure from opponents, and situations that limit a person's freedom of movement. Now, this does not need to be taken in a literal or dramatic way. When viewed together with the dasha patterns and the condition of Venus in his natal chart, the shift into Moon's period suggests a phase when old stories may be revisited, when past actions regain attention, and when external pressures also increase. I believe it can point toward a time when he may face stronger public challenges and a narrowing of options both legally and reputationally. I couldn't help myself but check his other divisional charts and his D4 chart, which governs real estate and one's physical place of living. Venus takes a very different role here. It's exalted in the 4th house and it rules the 6th and 11th. And Mars, natural significator of property and land, aspects this Venus. So it's very beneficial and it creates a stronger layer of protection around his living conditions and immediate environment. So even when other areas of life show restraint, the D4 patterns suggest that his residence, personal space, and support structures connected to property will remain stable and well fortified. So the effects of the past lunar and solar eclipses in September 2025 will carry forward until the next eclipse season in February 2026. And this window is still active, and it should bring further revelations connected to the Epstein documents and the broader network around that case. The astrology points toward continued disclosure rather than silence. Now, a public response toward former royal figure, Prince Andrew, was framed as a symbolic accountability. Yet the outer gesture of removing titles and reducing his living arrangements hardly matches the depth of suffering experienced by the victims. The weight of that story does not fall in ceremonial changes or altered residences. It falls on the actions of the man who created that harm in the first place. Their choices marked countless lives, and hopefully justice will be served eventually. In December, transit Mars moves through Sagittarius and crosses fixed star Les Astres. It's a sting of the Scorpio, the one that has the most amount of venom. So for him, for Bill Clinton, this falls in the 4th house and forms an 8 aspect toward a natal Saturn in 11th house. And we remember that Saturn is active now through the Shadashatri system. And so this very sharp contact becomes very noticeable and prominent. And it gives us some sort of promise to deliver some sort of events. And at the same time, transit Saturn squares this transit Mars in the from 7th house to the 4th, creating pressure on the axis of self and partnerships. So even though the degrees are not exact of this December situation, the impact reaches his first house, and it's not exactly close to Ascendant, but it's nearby. But it was not enough for me. So I was like, okay, so we have December, Saturn and Mars square, but Saturn moves slow, Mars go fast. When the Mars gonna come together with Saturn? And that alignment is happening in April 2026. And this is where the story gets interesting for Bill Clinton. Transit Mars and transit Saturn will conjoin in the 7th house of his chart at 12 to 13 degrees of Pisces. This is almost identical to the degree of his ascendant, right across, in opposition. And so when both malefics join on the horizon line, the effect is direct and it is impossible to ignore. So it signals confrontation, exposure, and circumstances that press upon a person from the outside world. So I have already spoken in earlier videos about March and April 2026 as a difficult stretch for a large portion of the population. You can check this my old YouTube video, and it's called Dangerous Dates for Humanity. So the charts suggest that first, that will be like a first shocking point, kind that rearranges global conditions, much very similar in the way early 2020 did, when all our reality got shaken up by the situation in the world. So this is not limited to individual charts. It is a collective pattern that will be felt wildly. But it's important also to check how it will affect you personally. It can be easily checked how it can be manifested on the personal level. And for Bill Clinton, this alignment stands across, as I already said, his ascendant, and strikes this central axis of the chart between identity and public presence. And so this can indicate a period when events may break suddenly into view, and when his ability to manage the situation is reduced. So basically, when Mars and Saturn are in square in December, it's a initial push, initial trigger, and then when Mars delivers that confrontation to Saturn in April, something happens. And I'm not speaking only about Bill Clinton now, of course. But specifically for him, it can speak about broader narrative of exposure and accountability that has been building all these months. Now, this brings us to the end of today's review of Bill Clinton's chart. When we place all the pieces together, the repeated activation of his debilitated Venus across several dashas systems, the eclipse patterns, the movement of Sun and Moon in his solar return, and the powerful Mars-Saturn alignments moving toward his opposition with his Ascendant, we see a cycle that is reaching its peak. The chart shows pressure building from several directions at once, and a period when past choices are no longer insulated from public view. So the months leading into spring 2026 from a decisive passage, and it is a time of exposure, accountability, both collectively and personally. So my intention here is not to dramatize, but to read the charts as it stands. The symbols point toward a decline that gathers strength through the next eclipse season and culminates when Mars and Saturn cross the sensitive degree in April. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope this analysis helps you understand the larger picture, the larger patterns at work as we move toward a turbulent but revealing period. Stay well, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.